Hey there, Math 7 students. I wanted to talk to you today about proportional relationships. When two quantities, x and y, are proportional, the relationship can be represented by the equation y equals mx, where m is the constant of proportionality. Another thing to keep in mind is that m is the slope, right? And the graph of a proportional relationship passes through the origin, the point 0, 0. So we've got some questions to go through. The cost in dollars to rent X video games is represented by the equation y equals 4x. Graph the equation and interpret the slope, right? So we have our equation y equals 4x. And I want to make a table first before I graph it. And I want to let's consider 0, 1, 2, and 3 video games, right? It doesn't make sense to rent negative video games, so we won't consider those right now. If I want to find the y value that goes with 0, right, we would plug it in to the equation. Y equals 4 times 0. Well, 4 times 0 is 0, so the y value is 0. That's how I get that point right there. And then I plug in 1, right? Y equals 4 times 1, and 4 times 1 is 4. And so that's how we get this y value of 4 right there. And what about 2? If I plug in 2 for x, I get y equals 4 times 2 equals 8. So 2, 8 is a point, and then 3, 12. And I get the 12 by plugging the 3 into the equation. 4 times 3 is 12. And so I get these points, and I need to plot them. And so we'll fold that over right there. You can see I have this little graph. I know that it goes through the 0, 0, and at 1, 4, right? The point 2, 8, so I go to the right 2, and then up 8, and I put my point. And then I want to connect, and 3, 12 would be like up there somewhere. But I'm going to connect those dots with a line, roughly, okay? And then they ask us to interpret the slope, right? The slope is the rise over run. In this case, it's 4, right? It's the 4 because it's in front of the x. The slope indicates that the unit cost is $4 per video game. So if you wanted to rent 3 video games, it costs you $12. So the slope is $4 per video game. Let's look at another example. A daily wage in dollars of a factory worker is proportional to the number of parts X assembled in a day. A worker who assembles 250 parts in a day earns $75. Write an equation that represents this situation. Well, before we can write an equation, we need to figure out what the slope is, right? Remember, slope is rise over run, or I have delta y over delta x. Delta is this little triangle. It represents change in. So that's a shorthand, right? So change in y over change in x. And they tell us what y represents. It's dollars. It's the wage. And x is the parts assembled. So the parts assembled, 250 parts, goes on the bottom. And if they earn $75, that goes on top because our wage is y values. So we do 75 over 250. But we need to simplify that, right? 75 and 250 are both divisible by 25. So I divide both top and bottom by 25, and I get 3/10. So y equals 3/10 times x. That is my equation. Box that up. That is my solution. So then we go on to part B. How much does a worker earn who assembles 300 parts in a day? Well, we want to start with the equation y equals 3/10 x, right? The equation that we found previously. But we want to substitute in the 300 for x. So we do 3/10 times 300, or 900 over 10, right? And 900 over 10 is 90. So $90 is what they would earn if they assembled 300 parts in a day. Okay, we've got one more example problem. It's a track problem. I know some of you are very much missing track right now. At a track meet, the distance, y, in meters traveled by student A in x seconds is represented by the equation y equals 7x. The graph shows the distance traveled by student B. Which student is faster? Well, we need to calculate the slope for student B, or the rate, right? And so we would do that by calculating from the graph the change in y over the change in x. And they give that to us, right? They show us that the change in y values is 24 and the change in the x values is 3. So we would do 24 over 3 and we get 8 meters per second, right? 8 meters per second. And 8 is more than 7. So student B is traveling faster than student A, because they're traveling 8 meters per second. Now part B, it says graph the equation that represents student A in the same coordinate plane as student B, and then compare and interpret the steepness of each graph. Well, you can sort of see some points plotted here. And it may make sense, it may not. But at 1 second, they have traveled 7 meters. At 2, they've traveled 14. At 3, it would be 21. At 4, 4 times 7 is 28. 5 times 7 is 35. 6 times 7 is 42. 7 times 7 is 49. And so you have a line that goes sort of like that. And so how do you compare them? Well, the graph that represents student B is steeper than the graph that represents student A. So student B is faster than student A. I hope that this helps you with your homework. If you have questions, be sure to email me specific questions or post them on the classroom dashboard. I hope that you and your families are well. We'll see you next time.